What's up guys, it's Alex here, your friendly reef dog. Now when you see your favourite tanks on YouTube, Facebook or forums, it's very easy to think they're perfect. But with every single tank, the owner will have made one mistake that has put a limit on how awesome it can be. And today I'm going to tell you what that mistake is on my tank, and I'm also going to tell you 3 more mistakes I've made whilst I'm at it. Now if this is your first time at the channel and you want weekly reefing goodness like this, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on anything. Right, let's take a look. The first mistake I want to tell you about is buying fish that are considered to be reef safe with caution, and I've been burnt twice here. Firstly with a Scarus koi parrotfish that started eating some of my most expensive corals within minutes of going in the tank, and secondly with my harlequin tuskfish who ate a cleaner shrimp and a jawfish, then proceeded to bully my Solon wrasse to death. Now I actually think it's worth taking a punt on fish considered to be reef safe with caution. They're some of the most stunning fish in the hobby and many are well worth the sacrifices you have to make. But the tuskfish and parrotfish were miscalculations. They're both far better suited for a 6-foot plus tank rather than my little 4-footer. And I made the classic schoolboy error of researching minimum tank size, then convincing myself they'd be okay in a smaller tank. The better approach to reef safe with caution fish is to minimise the risk by making sure you can meet as many of their requirements as possible. A good example of that is my trio of hawkfish that are doing great in a decent sized tank with no delicious small shrimp or small crabs to munch on. The second mistake I want to tell you about is buying tricky fish without giving proper thought to their care requirements. The trickiest fish I've bought for this tank have been a copper-banded butterfly, a china wrasse and a peacock wrasse, all of which have died within a matter of weeks, which probably tells me they didn't have sufficient food sources. With all of these, I convinced myself my tank was mature enough to support them when it probably wasn't, and I didn't do enough to provide an alternative food source. In hindsight, I should have either avoided them altogether or provided several different varieties of food for them and fed heavily for at least the first few weeks. I also should have added live food and copepods regularly when they were settling in. And in the case of the wrasses, I already had several other wrasses that were always likely to outcompete the finicky peacock and china wrasses. Looking back, I let my desire for these fish cloud my judgment, something I suspect we've all done, but something I now give a lot more thought to with new additions. And the last of the smaller mistakes I want to tell you about was buying wild caught SPS corals too early. Wild SPS corals are notoriously difficult to keep and I've now abandoned them altogether. I have over 60 corals in my tank and only one of them was wild caught. In the first 6 months of my tank, I had problems with a rusty MP40 powerhead that I didn't identify for quite a while. That meant I had high levels of toxic metals in my tank which poisoned some of my corals. And sure enough, the first to go were my wild SPS colonies. And while a number of my captive bred frags survived, none of my wild colonies recovered, even after I identified and fixed the problem. While I've given up with wild caught SPS now, I do have one left and it's doing very well. And I also wonder if some of the others I bought might have fared better if I didn't buy them within the first 6 months of setting up the tank. SPS corals just don't like new tanks, and that goes double for wild SPS. But the single biggest mistake I've made in this tank is buying too many corals. Going to your local fish shop and coming away with something tiny but shiny is one of the best parts of this hobby. But I've taken it too far and I've ended up massively overcrowding my corals. And the more they grow, the more this bothers me. SPS corals get big and in the right conditions will grow fast. And because I've packed my corals in so tightly, they're now starting to look cluttered. My intention with this tank was for it to be a true showpiece and as close to perfection as possible, but I've ended up doing a magpie and collecting far more shiny things than I need. And the most frustrating part of this is that I set out with the intention of giving my corals space to grow. I even did a video a year ago when I said this. Given the right conditions, SPS corals will grow fast and will get big. The temptation when you start buying SPS corals is to put them nice and close to each other to make your tank look good straight away. But it's far better to give them a bit of space to grow into. Now you might think I'm being fussy here and dressing up a trivial issue, and it's true to say that I'm still very happy with my tank, but the reason I consider this to be my biggest mistake is that I can't properly fix it without putting my tank through major surgery. Most of my SPS corals have based out, so removing them is not as simple as snapping them off. Realistically, I'd probably have to pull out most of my rockscape and start again, and that would do far more harm than it's worth. And I've already started to lose some of my SPS to coral warfare, something that will only get worse as time goes on. So realistically, my options are to shut down and start all over again, or just put up with it. Now there's no way I'm throwing away 2 years of hard work when ultimately I'm still happy with my tank, but the tank would have looked so much better had I heeded my own advice, and considering I was shooting for the stars with this tank, this really is my biggest regret.